Captain's log, day number 246, without MMA. I don't know who I am anymore. I haven't had anything to bet on for 2 weeks. This drought feels like it'll never end. My listeners are becoming restless. I have no action to give them. And what kind of a leader am I without anything to bet on?
You know the UFC is headed to Washington, DC this week, right?
What? No way!
No, seriously, the UFC's back this week.
Oh, I can't freaking believe it. I'm so happy. That makes me feel so much better. Seriously, thank God. I was about to go nuts.
Just thought you should know.
Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. And the drought is finally over. Welcome back, Die Hards. We are back for another episode of the Die Hard MMA podcast. The UFC is headed to Washington, D.C. I hope everybody had a phenomenal break. I personally got my ass kicked in football for the last 2 weeks, so the UFC could not have gotten back any sooner. I am ready to go. It feels good to be back at the desk. It feels good to be back behind the microphone, looking at odds, looking at overs, unders, underdogs, and watching tape of people getting knocked the fuck out. I am so excited to be back at this desk and looking forward to wrapping up 2019 strong. And there was surprisingly a ton of stuff going on in the last couple of weeks. For having down weeks and not having actual MMA to watch, there has been a absolute crap ton. Yes, that is a unit of measurement. There is a crap ton of news that we can take a couple minutes to go over because there wasn't an event last week. So I've got a little bit of wiggle room here at the beginning of the show to just kind of chat with everybody. First things first, Tony Ferguson versus Khabib is official for the fifth freaking time, and I am so happy they made the right choice. They pulled the trigger, even though I'm sure Dana was not happy about trying to book this thing since it appears to have been cursed in the past. But man, it is finally happening. I mean, I can't say too much. I can't get too excited. It has fallen apart at the very last second several times before. We've all been there and seen it and cried about it. So, I mean, fifth time, it's got to be the charm. These guys are going to do anything and everything to get their asses to the cage, and we finally get to see that fight take place. And second, yes, that's right, I said second, the return of Conor McGregor to the UFC's octagon, and he's coming back against none other than Donald Cowboy Cerrone. That is one hell of a fight, and might I say, that is the perfect fight for one Conor McGregor to use to return to the cage, to kind of get himself back into the groove of things. There's been a crap ton of other awesome fights that have been announced. I mean, Jan Blachowicz versus Corey Anderson in a number one contenders fight is happening. Holly Holm versus Raquel Pennington has been rebooked. We are inching ever closer to the big UFC event to end the year with not one, not two, but three title fights on the card. I mean, what more could you want? What a time to be alive. We went through a short drought, and here we are on the backside of this thing with some kick-ass stuff coming up and a peek at 2020 and what we're going to kick off with. I mean, we've even got stuff like Dan Hooker versus Paul Felder, which is a hell of a fight, if I do say so myself. We got our man Juan freaking Adams, who has gone through a life change, had a makeover, and he's coming back against Taffa. That is a hell of a great fight, and I'm hoping that Juan gets it together and finally gets that UFC win, keeps his job, and can do some wrecking moving forward. Big fan of the guy. As a human being, I like him a lot, so I'm really hoping that he can pull through for us on that one. And then our girl, Jillian Robertson, looks like she is working social media. If you guys like following the ladies in MMA that know how to post, she's stepping up her game. Give her a follow. Go check her out. And then we've got Macy Chiasson versus Nico Montana that got announced. I mean, damn, dude, there's just all kinds of stuff going on in the MMA world right now. It is a great time to be an MMA fan. But unfortunately, I do have to pump the brakes a little bit here For those of you who are new to the show, you need to know one thing and one thing only about me as a host of a podcast. I don't feed the trolls. We are all about positivity over here. We are all about looking to the good side, supporting people, and especially the fighters who we bet on and pay our hard-earned cash to watch for entertainment on these weekends, on these cold Saturday nights. So, with that being said, something happened this past week, which I'm not a fan of. There are very, very few things that you can do to get blocked by me on social media, especially on Twitter. And the number one thing you can do is be an asshole. The number two thing is that you can tag fighters in my comments or on my takes on matchups. You do that and you're blocked. And there's no arguing this point with me. So let me explain this to you. I'm running a podcast. I have fighters from time to time come on the show and we do interviews and stuff like that. I'm not sure how much I'm going to do of that moving forward because it's a very difficult thing to do when you're betting on fighters and you're very honestly analyzing what fighters can and can't do, their strengths and their weaknesses. And these are human beings. So they do not take kindly to you putting money on the fact that they are going to lose or putting money on the fact that they have no chin. They do not like hearing that. And I can 1000% understand that. I wouldn't like that if somebody did that to me. So when we are talking about this stuff, you've all got to understand, I love and respect every single fighter that steps in the cage. I make money off them. I love the content that they produce. It's my favorite sport in the world. So I'm not being disrespectful to any of them. And I hate when people are dicks to fighters simply for the joy of being dicks to fighters or giving them crap because they lost a fight that they bet on or something like that. That's not what these people deserve. You do not need to pile on them in these kinds of situations. So when I give a take on a fight or a fighter in particular, do not tag them in my post. And you're only going to get one strike at this. If you tag a fighter, especially when I say that I think one is going to lose or something along those lines, you're blocked. And that's just it. You're not going to see my shit anymore. I'm not going to see your shit anymore. It's done. It's over. Do not do it. I tweeted out that the Conor versus Cowboy fight, it's the perfect fight for Conor. And let me break that down here a little bit for you. I want to talk about it here for just a minute. So, Conor has been away from the cage for a very, very long time. We all know Conor McGregor has not won a fight in over 2 years. All right, he ran off and did his boxing thing with Floyd Mayweather. He comes back, he fights Khabib, he gets mauled, and then he disappears and he goes around the world selling his whiskey. So he has not won since he beat Eddie Alvarez in 2016. I mean, we're looking at 3 years at this point since he won a fight. Sorry, scratch, not 2 years, 3 years. And do you really think that someone who tasted the very top of the world in MMA and is looking to do so again, is looking to put together another run while he's still in his early 30s, while he's still in his fighting prime, while he's the biggest draw the UFC has ever seen, while he's the guy that even after the debacle that's been the last couple of years with him, the UFC still has as more than likely their biggest draw, financially speaking. Do you really think they're going to put him in a losing position? The answer is no. No, they're not. So he's coming back to fight Donald Cowboy Cerrone. And I love Cowboy. I am a huge fan of Cowboy. But Cowboy has been TKO'd in his last 2 fights. I know the doctor stoppage with Tony Ferguson is not exactly a TKO loss, but he got wrecked by Justin Gaethje. His wins over Mike Perry, Alexander Hernandez, and Ali Aquinta are not title caliber fights. And then before that, he lost to Jorge Masvidal, Robbie Lawler, Darren Till via brutal KO, and Leon Edwards. The fact of the matter is, as much as we all love Donald Cerrone, he is not a championship caliber fighter. He's 36 years old. He's facing the twilight of his career. He's a fan favorite. He's got some wicked skills. And we can have a couple more years of watching him have really, really fun fights. We can. Don't get me wrong. He's one of the best. He's phenomenal. He's been great his entire career, and I love the guy. But the UFC have handpicked him because he is a good name, he's a big draw, and he's somebody that Conor can beat. And in my opinion, the line is wide. Okay, when we're talking about the betting line, it's wide. And that's because the books know they're going to get pummeled with McGregor money. They know that they are just going to get hammered with McGregor money. So he is the betting favorite, a large betting favorite, for a reason, because they want to lower that risk on him. But I tweeted out that this is a get-right fight for Conor McGregor, because that's exactly what it is. The UFC want their biggest star back. They want Conor McGregor back on track. They want him fighting for a title as soon as possible. What's the guy in either the 170-pound division or the 155-pound division that they can give him that will get him right, but will also demand the respect of the fans? That's right, it's Donald Cowboy Cerrone. This is a hand-picked opponent. It's a hand-picked fight. It's a get-right fight for Conor. I stand by that. Now, I'm not saying that Cowboy's a slouch. I'm not saying that Cowboy can't win, because we all know I love my long shot underdogs, and damn, if the line stays where it's at, I might even bet on Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Except I might not, because you all know that I can't bet Donald Cowboy Cerrone to save my soul. But either way, one of the followers of the podcast, who I'm actually fond of, tagged Donald Cerrone in my tweet and said I was being pure disrespectful because he's a fan of Cowboy. And that shit don't fly. You can't do that, because if I get a rep, or if I get fighters who I personally love hating me because in one circumstance I have picked against them, it makes it real hard to operate, especially when I'm looking to grow the show, get a good, reputation out there with both fighters and fans. It makes it really tough. So just, don't do that shit. Just don't do it, because you'll get blocked. I know you can still listen to the podcast, so you can still tune in and hear the info. You can always go make a burner Twitter account to talk to me about it or something if you want to. But it's just one of those things that you go on my burn list when you do that, essentially, because it's disrespectful. We talk about fighters in an honest sense. I've said some things about some fighters that they would perceive as being very degrading, I'm sure. They would take offense to a lot of things that I've said, but you know what? I've been right a lot. And we've made money this year betting on these fighters because of how honest we have to analyze them, even when we're fans of them. It hurt my soul to bet against Roxanne Modafferi. But her last fight, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that Modafferi was going to lose that fight. And we had to take that money because it was a good spot. It was easy money for us to bet against her. And it hurt me to go against a fighter that I love so much. So we have to do that from time to time here on the show. So all I'm saying is, do me a favor. Don't be throwing me under the coals. Don't throw me under the bus when I have a hot take on one specific fight, because the fighters will not remember the 3 times I bet on them before. They're just going to get tagged in the one time that I said, I don't think they're going to get this one. And when that happens, they're going to write me off. So if you're a fan of the show, if you're a fan of me, if you're a fan of what I do, if you're a supporter, don't be tagging me, and don't be tagging my fighters when I pick against them, please and thank you. That being said, we've got the drama out of the way, and I want to go on to some more fun topics. So some of you may know I do articles. I write for SBR. That's sbrsportspicks.com. They are the best odds company out there. They rate sports books and let you know where you're going to get your money in safest, the best. They also have a tracker with all the different major books where they track the odds. You can find your best odds option on their website. I do work for them. I am part of the SBR Low Bag crew. I do their live shows. I am the MMA guy over at SBR. And they have a contest running right now. So a couple months ago, we did the Lords of the Cage MMA betting contest, and I was your host for that, and it was a success. And because of that, they have decided to bring back the Lords of the Cage contest, except this time they've got a twist. So head on over to the forum, the sbrforum.com. They have the Lords of the Cage 2 betting contest up. You can win free cash. All you've got to do is sign up for the forum, pick the fighters that you want to pick, and then what we are also doing this time is the sister site for SBR, the Live Line. There's a crew, 2 guys over there that give picks as well, and it's me and my buddy Nick, aka the Fat Fist, going up against the Live Line crew picks for the next 2 weeks. So if you want to come, it's free to enter, you can win some cash, and then you pick which team you want to side on. Lords of the Cage 2, sbrforum.com. It's a cool opportunity, and like I said, free cash and prizes. Come support your boy. Speaking of supporting your boy, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, please do me a favor. I would greatly appreciate it. I am turning this podcast into something. 2020 is going to be a big year. I did some Black Friday shopping. We got some cool stuff coming up on the horizon, and you don't want to miss it. So do me a favor. It'd mean the world to me if you share this thing. Hit that like button. I want to get this one up to 50 likes. We hover right around like 30, 40 likes a show. So let's bump this one up to 50. Come on, y'all. That's the goal. 50 likes. Let's hit this thing. And with that, I will not bug you any further. Let's get into UFC DC. Oh, it feels good to be back. We kick the night off in the middleweight division. Makhmud Muradov takes on Trevor Smith. Makhmud is 23-6-0. Trevor Smith is 15-9. Makhmud is younger by a long shot. He's 29 years old versus Trevor Smith, who is 38. And this is one of those ones that there is not a whole lot to say. The line basically says it all. Makhmud is a massive favorite. He opened up at about a minus 320 favorite. 62% of the money has poured in on Makhmud, driving him all the way up to minus 420 in places. You can get the comeback on Trevor Smith at plus 310. Makhmud is a kid that I've got my eye on. At 29 years old, he's coming into his fighting prime, and he is riding a ridiculous win streak right now. He also has a ridiculous number of finishes in that win streak. 15 of his 23 wins have come by KO TKO. He's got 3 submissions and 5 decisions in there. He is a finisher. So he steps up in September 2019, faces our guy Alessio Di Chirico. Now that's one where we dodged the bullet. I was very, very tempted to fire on my boy Alessio Di Chirico because I really feel like he's got untapped potential. He's the kind of guy that's got all the tools and just doesn't seem to quite be able to put it together. And I'm glad we didn't lose a unit betting on him because, we would have lost that one. Makhmud got the decision and looked good doing it. So before he got into the UFC, he was basically raffle stomping everybody, KOs left and right. This kid's got some serious power, and I can't wait to see what he does in the UFC. The UFC is throwing him, in my opinion, an easier fight. I think this is a step down in competition. He's facing Trevor Smith, who's been around basically forever, and he's had a real up and down career. I mean, if you look at some of the names on his record, he's kind of fought the who's who of the lower middle end of the division. So he's fought Elias Theodoro, Zach Cummings, Andrew Sanchez, Dan Miller, Talis Ladies, Ed Herman, Tim Kennedy. He got TKO'd by Gian Vellante back in Strikeforce. I mean, he's knocking on the door of 40, and he's coming off a 2-fight losing streak right now. This is the UFC throwing Makhmud a bone. They want this guy to win this thing, and the odds definitely reflect that. So the problem with this is, y'all know I don't take these massive favorites. I just don't do it because you can't make money betting MMA that way. You can't. But what we can do is take a look at the odds on the total. Right now, the total's sitting at over under 2.5 rounds. The over is the favorite at minus 150, and we are going to fire the first fight of the night on the under 2.5 at plus 120. That's right, the show is back. We are already betting dog lines, folks. We're going to hit the under 2.5 at plus 120. I think Makhmud is going to maul Trevor Smith. And this is one of the things, two things that we see a lot in MMA. You get into the UFC. Your number one goal is just to win that damn fight, because when you step up and take your first UFC fight, you're a ball of nerves. You're an absolute ball of nerves. You've got the jitters. You want to perform, and not everybody does. It's a big step up in competition from what you're used to, and you've got to adjust. And when you get a fighter that wins their UFC debut, usually that means good things moving forward, because that's not an easy thing to do, especially since he jumped up and fought Alessio Di Chirico. Now, what we see, though, is when you get these guys that are stomping the low-level competition on the outside of the UFC scene, and then they do get that step up in the UFC, they usually start winning by decision. And that's because they're not quite used to what it takes to finishing these upper level guys. Now, when they get the right matchups, after they've gotten their feet wet a couple fights in, that's when the finishes start materializing again with the more elite fighters. So Makhmud may run a couple decisions and then he'll start finishing people. He got a decision over a very, very tough Alessio Di Chirico. So I feel he's at the level where those finishes will in fact start materializing. Trevor Smith, on the flip side of this, has the second angle that I like to take here. You get these aging UFC veterans, and what they do is eventually their records just start to plummet, and that's what we're seeing here. He's 1-3 in his last 4. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. Now, those fights, they get ground out. They're still competitive. They look like there's a spark there. They still got it just a little bit. And then they get thrown to a kid that's dangerous. And instead of losing a decision, they get the lights shut off. It's because as they're going on these losing streaks, retirement's in the back of their minds. They know they're getting older. They know they've got to start looking for other avenues. They're trying to bank a couple paychecks. Some of them are looking to make one last run at it. And it's just not going to happen for most of them. And like I said, they start to have that damage accumulate. They have their durability is starting to wane. And their confidence in themselves as a fighter is starting to drop, and then they fight a monster who is out to rip their heads off, and then the finish materializes. They get knocked out, and that is, I think, exactly what's going to happen here. I think Makhmud Muradov is going to maul Trevor Smith. He's going to get his second UFC win, and I think he's going to do it in style. I think he's going to absolutely demolish Trevor Smith, and I think he gets it done probably in the second round. He'll kick it up a gear and Trevor Smith will just not be able to hang. So we're going to take that shot under 2.5 at plus 120 for the first pick of the night. Let's go. The second fight of the night is a women's strawweight fight where we have Virna Jandiroba taking on Mallory Martin. Now, Mallory Martin, from what I understand, is dating Deron Wynn, mini DC. And I see a lot of people really hanging their hat on that, going, well, she's hanging out with him. She's dating him. She's got to be a good grappler. And yeah, I don't see it. So this is one, I'm going to tip my hat here. I don't like a side in this fight. This is one I want to pay attention to, keep an eye on, kind of bank some information for later. Mallory Martin might very well have something going for her. She seems like she's got some good pieces, but she's very young in her career and she's got a lot of growing to do. She trains out of Zingano Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Tiger Muay Thai, which that is a fantastic combination of camps. So I do like her in that aspect. But Jandiroba, she's 14-1, and she was basically on an undefeated run until she ran into Carla Esparza. She got out grappled by Carla back in April, and here she's looking to get right in her second UFC fight. And this is actually going to be the UFC debut for Valerie Martin. So again, we've got one of those spots where we've kind of got conflicting spots here. We like to fade people making their UFC debut, stepping up in competition. That's exactly what this is for Mallory Martin. However, Mallory Martin may have all the tools. She's younger. She's in the right place. She's in the right camp. Jandiroba is no joke. She is mean. She's got 11 submissions. So even if this thing does go to the ground, she's going to be very dangerous there. I want nothing to do with it. I see a lot of people taking that shot on Mallory Martin. It's a low-level women's MMA fight, and plus 225 is about where she's sitting right now. I do not blame anybody for taking the stab on Mallory Martin at plus 225. I mean, that's about where the line needs to be. I'll give that to you. So good on you if you want to take that role on Mallory Martin. I'm going to get a little more loose. I'm going to get a little more comfortable with MMA being back before I start taking crazy ballsy shots on that one. And I'll be honest, I just do not have a great feel for these two women. So I want to kind of watch them grow a little bit more before I do anything. All right. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I'm going to go ahead and apologize. You may hear my daughter singing the Frozen 2 soundtrack in the background while I'm doing this podcast. There's nothing I can do about it. We watched it over the weekend, and pretty good movie, actually, but my daughter is completely obsessed, and we've been listening to Into the Unknown basically on repeat for the last 5 days. I can't get it out of my head. So I'm sorry if you can hear her in the background. Our next fight is at lightweight. Joe Solecki is taking on handsome Matt Wiman. Joe Solecki is 8-2-0. Matt Wiman is a UFC veteran, and he is 16-8. Joe Solecki is a young 26 years old, and Matt Wiman is 10 years his elder at 36. He's another one of these twilighting type of aging veterans here. Joe Solecki comes off the Dana White Contender Series 3, and this kid is a ground game savant, I guess would be a good way to put it. He has got 6 of his 8 wins by submission, and this is another case of the UFC trying to springboard a young kid off of an aging vet. Matt Wiman returned after a 5-freaking-year layoff, and they threw him to the wolves against Luis Pena, and it looks like they're just trying to do the same damn thing to the poor guy here. So he is coming back, a relatively quick turnaround after his TKO loss in June to take on Solecki. Now, here is where things get interesting. My trigger finger is an itching. The line right now is Joe Solecki minus 320, taking on handsome Matt Wiman at plus 260. They are giving me damn near plus 300, and money is just continuing to come in on Joe. And I am very, very tempted to take a shot on handsome Matt Wiman. That's right. I am very much considering it. 62% of the money is coming in on Joe, and he is just becoming a giant, giant favorite. Now, this is his first UFC fight off the Contender Series, and we have seen Contender Series guys struggle. His 2 losses, one by decision, one by KO, leads us to believe that he is still developing as a fighter. And really, the thing with Pena, Matt Wiman looked good in the first round of that fight. He didn't look bad. He looked like he still had it as far as the ability to fight, his skill set, his grit, his heart was really on full display. And Luis Pena looked like John Jones in there. Matt Wiman, I think, lost more due to the size disadvantage in that fight, the height, the reach. He just couldn't handle the physique of Luis Pena, and that is not something that Joe Solecki is going to have. Matt Wiman is 5'10", Solecki is 5'9". Wiman is more than likely going to have a slight reach advantage, and if not, they're going to be comparable. And the fact that Joe Solecki is a ground fighter, this is almost like a Diego Sanchez-esque spot, where I don't know that Joe Solecki can sub Wiman. I mean, Pena tried his face off to sub him. It's not happening. Wyman's got excellent submission defense. In fact, he's lost by KO 3 times in his career, and never once has he been submitted, and that's Joe Solecki's wheelhouse. I gotta wonder if Wiman can keep Joe off him and make him stand and box with him. This might actually be a spot where Wiman can get one over and get an upset. I think the line is way too wide for a kid coming off the Contender Series. I am not going to pull the trigger yet because I think more money will come in on Joe Solecki, so that line is going to get wider leading up to fight time. I need to do a little bit more research, and I also want to see the type of condition that Matt Wiman is in. Now, I know he is not the type of fighter who comes in all ripped up and things like that. He doesn't really have the physique. He's definitely not Paulo Costa, I guess. Let's just put it that way. But he's not the kind of guy. If he comes in flabby, if he comes in overweight, if he looks, really bad, then we're not going to pull the trigger on him. And since he doesn't do anything on social media, it's really freaking hard to find anything on the guy. But honestly, I really feel like this is a spot where he might paper, rock, scissors match up really well with Joe Solecki. And because of that, it might force me into taking that long shot on handsome Matt Wiman. So we'll see. This is one where you got to keep an eye on me on Twitter. Give me a follow at Die MMA Pod. I will chat with you about the fights. I will answer your questions if there's things that you want to know. And then you get my early tweets for when I find a spot that I like and I want to beat a line move. You'll also get my late tweets for when I add a pick that comes after the show. I record the shows on Tuesday nights every single week. That way you guys can get the information, get out there, make your bets. And because of that, the show lines are locked in on Tuesdays, except for in situations like this where I have a strategy in mind and I might hesitate just a little bit to make a play and I have to wait and kind of do a little bit more digging. You get those plays if you follow me on Twitter. Because if you follow me blindly right now and you take Matt Wiman, I might not actually pull the trigger myself, and then I don't want to hear anybody crying because, I didn't make it official. So keep an eye on my Twitter, and we'll see where this one goes. For the next fight, we're hanging out at featherweight where Bryce Thug Nasty Mitchell is taking on Matt Sayles. And this is maybe the sleeper fight of the night. This one is going to be intense. So Bryce Mitchell is an undefeated 11-0. He's got 2 UFC fights, both of them wins. The Ultimate Fighter Finale 27, he beat Tyler Diamond, who I believe was also undefeated at the time. And then he's got a win over Bobby Moffett. In my opinion, 2 very respectful wins for your first 2 UFC fights. Matt Sayles, on the flip side of this thing, has come to us from the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. I guess he's kind of maybe the protege of one Dominic Cruz, and he lost his UFC debut against Shimon Moraes, which, really no shame in that, but unfortunately Shimon has been dropped from the UFC, so something we kind of got to keep in mind there. Now, he did bounce back beating Kyle the Monster Nelson, and that's something that I find very, very intriguing. I'm a fan of Kyle Nelson. I think he's another one of these underrated Paul Craigie type guys that will get at dog odds and be able to bank some wins with, and he catches people unexpectedly. He's way more talented than people give him credit for. So that is a good win for Matt Sayles. However, we also know that Kyle Nelson has a bit of a cardio issue, and that was one where he gassed out, and he gassed out hard in round 3. Matt Sayles took advantage of that. He is not going to get that leg up with Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell is a cardio machine. He's got 8 submission wins, and he's got 3 decisions. He just grinds on his opponents until they give up the chokes, and this is where another one of those spots I was kind of talking about before, he murked everybody on the regional scene, and then he stepped up in competition. He's got his fights in the UFC, and he's got a couple of decisions. He's gonna start finishing people. This is a young 25-year-old kid. Actually, both these guys are 25, but they are both putting it together, and you're gonna start seeing those finishes emerge. And Matt Sayles has already got one over a UFC caliber fighter. So, this fight's gonna be an absolute banger. Matt Sayles is a footwork fanatic like Dominic Cruz. He's got 6 wins by KO TKO. He's going to be the stand-up fighter. Basically the theory of this entire fight card is striker versus grappler. You know that? There's a lot of fights on this card where it's striker versus grappler, and this one is no different. So it's really going to come down to game plan. Who can implement their game plan? If Bryce Mitchell can get the takedowns, if he can get this thing to the mat, I think he's got the advantage. And if Matt Sayles is able to keep this thing standing, use his footwork, and then, use his hands, he probably wins a decision there. This is going to be very closely contested, and it's one of those ones that if you take a stand on either side of it, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I just think it's too close to bet. The line is about at a pick'em. It is slightly shaded, it looks like, very slightly shaded to Matt Sayles. And I got nothing. I got absolutely nothing. I'm going to watch this one. I cannot wait to see what both of these guys do. I think they both have very, very bright futures in the UFC, and this is a sleeper for maybe fight of the night. The next fight's at lightweight, and it's highly disappointing to me. I'm going to be quick here on this one. I don't fucking care about this fight. We were supposed to get Chris Fishgold taking on Billy Quintello, and I was looking for a great spot to bet on Fishgold to bounce back. I'm not impressed with Billy whatsoever, and after Chris dropped out, Jacob the Killer Kilburn is stepping in on short notice to take on Billy. He's 8-2, making a short notice UFC debut. Not always the best of options, but he's facing a guy that I don't know if he's even UFC caliber himself. He did get a TKO on Dana White's Contender Series, but again, I'm not sold on the Contender Series guys. A lot of them tend to be struggling in the actual UFC. The line is bonkers. The line is absolutely out of control. Billy is a -300 favor over Jacob Kilburn, who is a +250 underdog. I haven't taped this one. I wait till a little bit closer to fight time to actually research because of shit like this where Fishgold drops out. If I had done my homework way early, I would have wasted all of those hours, so thank God I didn't. But I have no interest in this fight. Over the next couple of days, I might take a look at Kilburn and see actually what he's got, because, like I said, that line, I'm telling you right now, is wide, because Billy just is not that good of a fighter, in my opinion. He might prove me wrong. We'll see what happens. I'm not touching this fight with a 10-foot pole. Good luck if you are. Now we get to the main event of the prelims. It looks like we've got Tim Means taking on Thiago Alves. And this is a pretty fun fight, actually. It's kind of unfortunate, though. We were supposed to get Mickey Gall versus Carlos Condit on this fight card, and that fight fell apart. I think the UFC is trying to protect Mickey Gall here. They thought he had a good matchup in Carlos Condit. They're trying to springboard him off an aging vet that they think he can use his ground game on top of, because we all know Condit has zero get-up game, unfortunately, as much as I love the guy. And it's just a bummer. And they didn't even give him a short notice replacement because, let's be real, they do not want Mickey Gall taking another loss. His career in the UFC cannot handle another loss, so they're not giving him a short notice replacement. He's going to get bumped onto a later card where they can give him yet another winnable fight. So instead, the main event for the prelims is Thiago Pitbull Alves versus Tim Dirty Bird Means. And it's a good one. The thing is, this is a fight that's very, very clear cut to me. This is one of I talk about fights where I can see the matrix. This is one of those. So Thiago Alves is 36 years old. He's 23-14. He is a legend. He's a small 170er. He can cut down to 155, but he can barely make it there because he had so much muscle on him back in the day. And he is barely hanging on to his UFC career. He is alternating 2 losses versus 1 win since 2015. He lost to Carlos Condit and Jim Miller. He bounced back against Patrick Cote. Then he lost to Curtis Millender and Alexei Kunchenko. He robbed Max Griffin in Brazil, and then he dropped a loss to Leonardo Strapoli. So the UFC is using him to build their names. It's pretty obvious with those last 4 fights that the UFC is kind of springboarding people off of him at this stage, and he should be 0-4 in his last 4. He's 1-3 because, thank God, Brazil, we had him by decision at plus 300 on that card, looking for the robbery, and nailed it earlier this year in February. That was a fun fight to cash because everyone's jaw dropped when we pulled off the cash on the Brazilian robbery. Oh, good times. It's been almost a full year. Holy shit. So Tim Mead's on the flip side of this thing. He's 35, so he's going to be the younger fighter by one whole freaking year. He's also twilighting in his career. 28-11. He is a fan freaking favorite. Everybody loves this guy. He's also 1-3 in his last 4. He lost a split decision to Bilal Muhammad and Sergio Moraes, and then he beat Ricky Rainey, and then he got TKO'd by Nico Price. He is coming off the first TKO loss of his UFC career, and he's looking to bounce back, although I'm not really ultra high on Tim Means, and I don't understand why everybody is. I think he showed how dangerous he was early, but people figured him out. Maybe he just hasn't evolved as a fighter, and people can game plan for him relatively easily these days, because he is not having the success that people, especially MMA Twitter, expected him to. I'm a fan of the guy. I like his skill set. He's probably got a couple of fun years left in him, but this is the kind of fight that we should expect him to see going forward. So really, he's got a height and reach advantage, and that's all that makes the difference here. Both of these guys are strikers. Both of these guys are looking to extend their careers. Neither of them is winning by vicious KO very often. I mean, really, neither of them is winning very often in general, but if anyone's going to get the knockout, it's going to be Tim Means. He's got more left in the tank. I think that's painfully obvious. And really, Thiago Alves hasn't finished anybody since back in 2015. He's a decision machine these days and is just trying to survive this thing. Tim Means on the flip side of this thing, if you're gonna get into a brawl with him, he can clip you, but again, he's going to decisions himself. I think, especially coming off the first loss of his career, we kind of talked about this angle, not last week because there was no UFC last week, but the last event, how when you're coming off that loss, that knockout loss, and you're looking to rebound, all that matters to you is that W. All you want to do is get that win. You don't care how you do it. You don't care how ugly it is, how sloppy it is. You just need that win. And both of these guys are coming off that exact situation. I mean, I know neither of these guys are going to get their walking papers because they're such fan favorites, but realistically they could. Going 1-4 in your last 5 UFC fights, you very well could lose your job. I think both of these guys are very much going to be fighting not to lose rather than fighting to win. They'll probably trade leg kicks. They'll stay at range. I feel like it's going to be relatively slow paced. Neither of these guys is going to be chomping at the bit to get into a brawl. Because of that, rather than laying the wood on Tim Means, who I do think is going to win just by simply having a speed advantage, a height and reach advantage, I think he's a viable minus 265 favorite. If you want to parlay I feel like Tim Means is one of those favorites that you can tie with another decent-sized favorite to lock up even money or something like that. I'm just going to go over. I think this fight goes to decision. I'm going to take the over 2.5 at minus 140. That way I don't have to sweat if it's a close fight, if Tim gets caught like a deer in the headlights because of his KO and Thiago pulls off the win. I'm not sweating it. The only thing I have to sweat is Thiago Alves eating a knee if he decides he wants to try and take this thing to the ground. I think if that doesn't happen, we cash this relatively easily. We're going to go over 2.5 at minus 140. The next fight is one that's super intriguing to me. We're at bantamweight, where Ricky Simon is trying to make his return after getting flatlined by Uriah Faber. He's taking on Rob Font. And this one is super, super interesting to me. So Ricky Simon is 15-2. Prior to his loss to Uriah Faber, he only had one loss, and it was all the way back in 2016. He's 27 years old, and he is insanely athletic, insanely explosive. This kid has got some serious physicality to him, and I really feel like he ran straight into what Uriah Faber wanted to do. I mean, Uriah's got a very limited number of weapons, and I thought that Simon would completely maul him. I feel like that's a classic spot of looking past your opponent, which in the cage you simply can't do. And he paid for it. He paid for it badly. So that loss was back in July. And, I mean, we're looking at 5-6 months. So as far as him recovering from that kind of a knockout loss, we're right where about you would think we maybe need to be for him to make his return. He's a young kid. He can bounce back relatively quickly. But he's taking on Rob Font, who's a monster. So Rob Font is one of those guys that's hovering right around the top 10. And really, if he can put it together just a hair, he's going to crack the top. One thing that I find really, really weird about the situation is the line. These guys are lined super, super closely. Ricky Simon is currently plus 120 as an underdog, where Rob Font is sitting around minus 135. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So let's look at some of the fights that Rob Font has had. He lost a decision to John Lineker back in 2016, which no shame in that. He TKO'd my boy Matt Schnell, who I am high as fuck on. I love Matt Schnell, and I think he's one of these future contender types. And Rob Font KO'd him big time. So then he flips around and he submits mini Vitor Belfort, Douglas Silva de Andrade. He lost to Pedro Munoz, which that's one where there is no shame in losing to that guy whatsoever. And then he bounces back with a TKO win over Thomas freaking Almeida. And I know that one may not say as much, but I mean, Thomas Almeida, even with the rough run that he's had of it with Cody Garbrandt, Jimmy Rivera, and Rob Font, those are three fantastic names and the only 3 losses on his record. So he loses a decision to Rafael Assunção. Now, we all know all about Rafael Assunção. He grinds, and there's nothing you can do to stop him. Well, then Rob Font bounces back with a win over Sergio freaking Pettis, who was supposed to be one of the shortlisters, top 5 in the division. So Rob Font is right there. He's got a very well-rounded skill set. He's got great footwork. He's got good hands. He's got 7 wins by KO, 4 by submission, and then he can also go to a decision. He's got 5 of those. He's only been subbed once in his entire career, and that's the only finished loss of his career. The other 3 were all by decision. Now, Ricky Simon, on the flip side of this thing, like I said, he's 15-2, so he was on a hell of a run prior to running into Uriah Faber. But it's over Merab Dvalishvili and Montel Jackson, and then Ronnie Yaya. He won both of those by decision. Now, Montel Jackson, he's 8-1. He's impressive. We like Montel Jackson. Ronnie Yaya, he's another solid fighter. However, he's a submission guy, so running into somebody with a wrestling base is a bit of a problem for him. You're able to kind of nullify what he brings to the table. This is another striker versus grappler spot. If Rob Font can circle, if Rob Font can get back to his feet and then put his hands to work, I think he can win this thing. And I feel like this might be a buy low spot on a fighter that's crazy good like Rob Font, except I feel like I'm being trapped here because somebody who just got KO'd by the, shortly thereafter retired Uriah Faber, I guess shortly before retired Uriah Faber, how can this kid only be a plus 110? The bookies are basically saying that fight didn't matter. The bookies are basically saying that fight was a fluke, that you're not going to look into that loss whatsoever with this line. So I am very, very tempted to pull the trigger on Rob Font. But we've seen him get grinded on by Rafael Assunção and then get submitted by Pedro Munoz. This is a serious top 10 contender type of spot fight. One of these guys is going to break into the top 10 with an impressive win here. And I'm very, very leaning towards Rob Font. But I'm not quite sure. Something is holding me back. Something's not quite letting me pull that trigger, and I'm not sure what it is. Rob Font is 5'8". He's got a 71-inch reach, and he's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage here, so that helps. Ricky Simon's only got a 69-inch reach. Rob Font averages 4.94 significant strikes per minute, and he absorbs 3.88. So even with those losses, even with those big names on his record, he is outstriking his opponents. Now, he's got a takedown defense of 30%, and I think that's where my problem is, because we know what Ricky Simon is all about. In his 4 UFC fights, and that's including the super ultra fast knockout to Faber, he averages 6.66 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he averages that with a 52% accuracy. So it's a very, very high takedown accuracy, and he lands a lot of takedowns. So what that means is he's going to be grinding on Rob Font. I mean, against Muradov, he landed 2 takedowns, 3 takedowns of his own. Against Montel Jackson, he landed 7 takedowns, and then against Ronnie Yaya, he landed 4 takedowns. I mean, he's a machine. You might be able to get back up, but at some point, you're going right back down. And if that's what's going to happen, I mean, Rob will have his opportunities in there. I think this one's too close to call. It really pains me because if Rob Font wins, I'm going to feel like I left money on the table. But if he gets ground out by Ricky Simon, if he gasses out in round 3 because Ricky is just mauling him and doesn't stop and doesn't let him breathe, I'm going to feel really good about passing. So this is going to be a really good feeling or a really bad feeling for me after this one comes through, because I'm going to pass for now, but I've got a really solid lean to Rob Font, and this is another one to keep an eye out on my Twitter. Let's see where this line goes. Let's see if I end up getting a little more convicted later on in the week. I might have to end up pulling the trigger because I do just feel like Rob Font is going to get this one done. Our next fight is at bantamweight. We got a lot of little guys on this card. We have got Song the Kung Fu Monkey Yadong taking on Cody Mr. Wonderful Stamann. Now, Song Yadong was originally slated to fight Geraldo de Freitas Jr., and it looks like Cody Stamann is stepping in. And this is one that, again, I am very, very torn on. So Song Yadong right now is sitting as a minus 200 favorite. The over-under is set at 2.5. It is tilted to the over at minus 155. The under is plus 125. You can get Cody Stamann as a plus 170 underdog. And Cody Stamann is a machine. He is a grappler to his core, and all he does is grind. The man has 10 of his 18 wins by decision. He's managed to get the knockout in 6 of them. However, he hasn't gotten a knockout since he got into the UFC. In fact, the only finish he's got was when he lost by submission to Aljamain Sterling. He's won all of his other fights, and he's won them all by decision. So basically, I mean, there's nothing new about Cody Stamann. This guy is just gonna grind. All we are gonna see from him is trying to get on top of Song, and Song's gonna have to defend the takedown like never in his life before. Song Yadong is super fast, super explosive. He's got a fantastic counter game, and he, on the flip side of this, is the striker. Like I said, it's another striker versus grappler matchup. Song is only 22 years old, whereas Cody Stamann is 30. Song's got a 14-4 record, which really actually shows well-roundedness in the record. He's got 5 KOs, 3 submissions, and 6 decisions. He can handle himself pretty much anywhere, but it looks like he's kind of starting to put stuff together because those finishes are all coming in his UFC run. He has 4 UFC fights, and 3 of those 4 wins have come by finish. One of them coming most recently over Alejandro Perez, which I do put a little weight on and find very impressive. Interestingly enough, Alejandro Turbo Perez has fought both of these guys back to back. He lost a decision to Cody Stamann, and then he got knocked out by Song Yadong shortly thereafter. It's always interesting when these fighters kind of get stuck in a loop with one another. They kind of run along the same path, and then they run into each other after they've had common opponents. I always find that super weird. So let's take a look at the stats on this one. Cody Stamann is 5'6", so he's going to be a little bit shorter. Song Yadong is 5'8". Cody's got a 64-inch reach versus Song's 67, so he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage there. Cody Stamann tends to outstrike his opponents, 4.59 significant strikes landed per minute versus 3.29 absorbed. He has a 51% takedown accuracy, which anything over 50 is impressively high, especially when you're landing 3.28 takedowns per minute. So he's been able to take all of his opponents down, and except for Brian Caraway, I apologize, but he takes down, almost one per round. Basically, he'll land one takedown roughly per round in a 15-minute fight. Song Yadong, in his 4 UFC fights, has a 100% takedown defense, and he hasn't really fought any grappling heavy opponents, though, is kind of the problem. So even though he's got that 100% takedown defense, I'm not sure we can put too much stock into it. Now, he outstrikes his opponents massively. He averages 4.28 significant strikes per minute and only absorbs 2.75. So he is outstriking his opponents by almost 2 significant strikes every single minute. This kid throws heat, and I'm a huge fan of him. My only issue here is the line. I like Song Yadong. I really like Song Yadong in this spot, and he's one of these rising Chinese stars. I think he's got a really bright future. But running into a prime Cody Stamann, who is really making a push at that title, who's got an impressive record, who knows how to grapple and grind on people, and hasn't really shown himself to be chinny in any way, Yadong's going to have a real hard time catching and finishing Cody Stamann. We might have an upset situation here. I'm going to go ahead and pick Song Yadong. I don't have an official bet that I'm going to be putting on this one. There's no official play or pick. I think Song Yadong's going to win, but I wouldn't hate a dog shot on Cody Stamann. I feel like he might be getting disrespected just a little bit by this line, simply because he does have the skill set that you would need. And this is the kind of spot where you would expect a young rising star to falter. I think Cody has stepped in here on short notice with the opponent change because he sees that he can take this kid down and grind him. I'm almost talking myself into betting on Cody Stamann here at this point, so bear with me. I hate to do it again, but keep an eye on Twitter because I was intending on passing on this fight, but the more I talk about it and the more I look at it, the more I might end up taking that shot on Cody Stamann. But I can't make that decision on the fly. I'll have to do a little bit more work on it. Here's where we get to the short list, the good stuff. We have got Yana Kunitskaya taking on Aspen Ladd, a women's bantamweight fight, and this is a fun one. So we all remember what happened to Aspen Ladd back in July. In fact, we all remember cashing a juicy, I think, plus 230 on Jermaine freaking Durandamy in the first 16 seconds of that fight. She was not ready for that step up, and no, that was not an early stoppage. The referee saved her from some extended punishment because even though she was not out unconscious, yet the writing was on the wall. And Jermaine is a fantastic fighter who would have just kept on beating on her, which, by the way, we're going to take a close look at her because she's fighting for a title next week against the GOAT, and that is a hell of a fight. So Aspen Ladd takes her first round ass whooping, and then she goes and tries to contest the stoppage, and then she blames Herb Dean for sexism, saying that if it was a man that he would have let the fight go on longer. Disgusting. I posted on my Twitter about that. It was so disgusting. The poor man makes the right stoppage and tries to save a couple of this chick's brain cells, and she goes after him in front of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Drove me absolutely bonkers. Lost a little bit of respect for Aspen Ladd on that one. Still a fan of hers, though, and I'm looking forward to seeing her bounce back. So it looks like she has been training with the UFC Performance Institute. We all know the kind of struggles that she has had with her weight, but it looks like she has put a focus on getting that fixed. She's showing off a lot in her Instagram. That's another one. If the boys like some chicks that are thick with some abs, go check out Aspen Ladd's Instagram. She knows how to work it, and she posts pictures basically all the time. So she looks good. She looks like she's in phenomenal shape. I mean, she always does. She's huge for the division. The weight cuts are always brutal for this poor girl, and I'm very curious to see how she comes in here. I think that with working with a place like the Performance Institute, we're going to see Aspen Ladd 2.0. She's still only 24 years old. She's still figuring this stuff out. I think if she leans out a little bit more, naturally speaking, and keeps her weight down in general between fights, she'll have a easier cut, and they'll be able to get the science down for her so she can actually make it down to 135 without quite as many issues. Now, on the other side of the cage here, we've got Yana Kunitskaya, who's 12-4. She's on a nice little 2-fight win streak over Lena Landsberg and Marion Renault after getting fed to Christina Cyborg. Not a good look. The UFC basically gang jumped her into the UFC. They were like, yeah, we'll sign your UFC contract, but first you got to fight Cyborg at 145. After that, you can drop down to 135. So she gets KO'd in the first round, easy peasy, by Cyborg, drops to 135 immediately, and now she's on a 2-fight win streak, poor girl. So she's running into Aspen Ladd, and this is another of a bit of a striker versus grappler situation. Yana Kunitskaya is going to try and work the clinch on Aspen Ladd. The only problem is, in the clinch, you've got to be able to physically dominate your opponent, and that's not something I think that she can do. Aspen Ladd is beastly strong. I mean, she is insanely strong, especially for the women's division. And if she gets you on the ground, she has hellish ground and pound. She will destroy anybody if she gets on top of you. And I think if you lock horns with her like Yana wants to do in the clinch, that causes a problem because you're close to her and she will take you down. Aspen Ladd has a 5.52 significant strikes per minute landed ratio. Now, she absorbs 4.99, so she's outlanding her opponents, but she has such a high pace that she tends to get landed on back pretty well too. She got heavily outlanded by Lena Landsberg in their fight, actually, looking back on that. Very interesting to see those numbers. Yana Kunitskaya also averages a very high output, 5.24 significant strikes per minute. Now, she outstrikes her opponent much more cleanly with a 4.01 significant strikes absorbed ratio. However, she has a 0 takedown defense rating. That's right. You're not looking at that wrong. She has a 0 takedown defense rating. She hasn't defended a single UFC takedown. Aspen Ladd, on the other side of this thing, averages 2.29 takedowns per minute, and she has an 80% takedown accuracy. This fight goes one way in my brain, and that's that eventually Aspen Ladd lands that takedown. And when she does, she caves Yana Kunitskaya's head in. I think she's going to be Aspen Ladd 2.0. I think the UFC Performance Institute is going to get her right, and I think bouncing off of the first loss of her career, she's going to come back hungry, she's going to come back mean, and we've already seen Yana Kunitskaya get knocked out in the first round before. I think it's going to happen again. I'm rolling with Aspen Ladd. We can get her at minus 155 right now, and I really think in a bounce back spot, that's a very good price. The prop on Aspen Ladd inside the distance is plus 250 right now, and I think that's juicy AF. I'm very tempted to hit that. However, I am going to wait for the rest of the props to come out. All we can get right now is inside the distance. Women's fights don't usually end by TKO. However, that is Aspen Ladd's specialty. So I'm going to look for the prop when it comes out for Aspen Ladd by TKO, because we're probably going to get a little extra change there, and you can guarantee I will be sprinkling that Aspen Ladd by KO line here. Our next fight of the night is an absolute dumpster fire. An absolute freaking dumpster fire. We have Big Ben Rothwell, who I was very recently way too high on, taking on Stefan the Skyscraper Struve, who I've never been high on and very recently was retired. This is a heavyweight slugfest that's just going to make me cry a little. So Stefan Struve is 29-11, with 7 of those 11 losses coming by KO. He was on a 3-fight losing streak versus Alexander Volkov, Andrei Arlovsky, and Marcin Tybura before finally landing a submission win over Rogerio de Lima in February of 2019. Immediately after, walked away on top. He did it right. He got his retirement fight. He got the win, and he walked out when he saw the writing on the wall. And now, like a freaking idiot, he's coming back. From the human perspective, I like Stefan Struve. And I hate that he is returning to the UFC. He's only 31 years old, and he is that guy that everyone said, one day he's going to be champ. One day he's going to fill out into that massive 7-foot frame, and he's just going to be an absolute monster. And then his chin failed him. He got KO'd by Junior Dos Santos way back in 2009, then by Roy Nelson again in 2010, then by Travis Brown in 2011, Mark Hunt, Alistair, Overeem, Alexander Volkov. I mean, this guy's KO list is a who's who. It's ridiculous how many people have knocked this dude the fuck out. And here he is coming back. Now, Big Ben Rothwell's got some struggles of his own. He's 38 years old. At heavyweight, that's not quite such an issue. We've talked about that before. The old guys retain their power and they can kind of keep things going later than most other fighters. And he's got 3 losses in a row, all by decision. So 2016, he lost to Junior Dos Santos. That's back when he was actually looking pretty damn good. Takes a 3-year USADA suspension layoff. Comes back versus Blagoy Ivanov. Still not sure how I feel about that one. I've been raving for the last year or so that he won that fight. Not so sure he did anymore. My opinion has changed based on the way the ruling and judging of MMA has changed, and he may have in fact lost that fight. However, it was close. He lost to Andrei Arlovski, and that was another one where I was very tempted to be on him for, because Andrei Arlovski is also very faded at this point in his career. But Big Ben actually just kind of got busted up by Arlovski back in July. He's making a pretty quick turnaround here, and his durability is still intact. His toughness is still intact. He was really pouring it all on late in round 3 against Arlovski, and I thought he might actually get the finish there. So he's still got some heat that he throws. He's still got some power, and Stefan Struve's chin is just something that you always, always, always want to fade. However, Big Ben Rothwell is a minus 140 favorite. At this point in his career, I cannot justify betting on Big Ben Rothwell as a favorite. You can't trust the guy. You cannot lay wood on Big Ben Rothwell. He will drop the ball. He will disappoint you. Even if he manages to win this thing, you just can't put that kind of price on this guy. And on the flip side of this thing, I hate retired fighters. I love to fade fighters that are coming out of retirement because they think they've just got one more. Just one more. I won last time, didn't I? Of course I can win. I've still got it. I can beat these guys. No, you can't. You retired at the right time. Stay gone. So it hurts me a little bit to see Stefan Struve come back. And as much as, maybe if you think, okay, so we fade Big Ben Rothwell, right? Let's take a shot on Stefan Struve because he's always got that submission game. Plus 120 is not enough. Plus 120 is not nearly enough. And again, you can't trust this guy either. So we can't trust either fighter, and we're not getting enough on Stefan Struve to be able to justify taking that dog shot. What I'm very tempted to do, though, is look at the under. So they've got it set at 2.5. It's shaded to the under minus 125 for under 2.5 rounds, and I actually like that. Like I said, Stefan Struve is a submission threat. That's kind of his go-to gig. He's got 18 submission wins, and don't get me wrong, he's actually able to get some KOs with those freaking long limbs. Back in the day, 2012, he's actually the guy that knocked out Stipe. I know that was really a fluke. It was when Stefan Struve was really streaking and we all thought he was headed places. That's when he got the KO on Stefan Struve. That was a long, long time ago. Since then, he's only knocked out Antonio Bigfoot Silva, which my 4-year-old daughter could knock out Antonio Bigfoot Silva. He could get that submission. Big Ben Rothwell likes to play on the ground. He has been submitted twice. However, it's been a long time since Gabriel Gonzaga got him all the way back in 2013. He's a very, very well-practiced submission artist himself. He's got 6 sub wins, which I know that's not a lot, but he's got 27 wins by KO. I mean, before he took the suspension layoff, he was coming off of submission wins over Brandon Vera, Alistair Overeem, and then submission wins over Josh Barnett and Matt Mitrione. He was a machine right before he took the layoff. So there's always that chance that Big Ben Rothwell cracks Stefan Struve, but I think both these guys are in the don't lose mindset. Stefan Struve, maybe not so much. He's probably riding high coming off that submission loss, and Big Ben Rothwell is going to be in the don't lose mindset, very angry coming out here. I think that under 2.5 has a decent chance of cashing. However, I don't want to bite on that because we've seen Big Ben Rothwell slow down to the point that he may just look to grind out that win here. So this whole thing is a pass. I may end up going on that under 2.5. I'm going to think about that a little bit more. I'm passing on it for now. It's been so long since we've had MMA to bet on. I feel like I'm itchy. I want to pull the trigger on like everything. I can't be controlled on the first freaking night of fights that we're back. I want to have like 7 or 8 bets going, even though that's not a great idea. All right, co-main event time. We have got Marina Rodriguez taking on Cynthia Calvillo, and this is a phenomenal fight. Calvillo's 32 years old. She's kind of coming into her own, coming into her prime after a late start in mixed martial arts. She is 8-1-0, with her only loss coming via decision to Carla Esparza when she took a little step up in her own world. She is the grappler in this setup, and we're going to continue on with that grappler versus striker mentality. Marina Rodriguez is a striker. She's 12-0, 5 KOs to her name. She did go to a draw with Randa Marcos, who's a grappler, and that gives us a little bit to work with as far as what she's capable of keeping the fight standing. However, I think Cynthia Calvillo is a much better grappler than Randa Marcos at this stage. Maybe. That might be a little strong. I'm kind of high on Randa Marcos, but her fight IQ isn't the best. Anyway, let's not get into Randa Marcos right now. She got her last win over Tecia Torres, which was highly disappointing to me. We know that Tecia Torres now is not what everyone thought that she was. Well, everyone, I guess I should just say me. She's not what I thought she was. I was high on Tecia Torres, and she shit the bed yet again. She goes in the never bet on her ever again trash can. And I think Rodriguez stands a good shot of doing the same exact thing she did to Marcos and Torres in this fight. Cynthia Calvillo has been relatively inactive. I mean, she fought a couple times in 2017, and since then, she only fought once in 2018. She got a win over Poliana Botello via submission, and then we didn't see her again until the beginning of February. So she's gone almost another full calendar year prior to this fight. So that's one of those situations where I'm not sure if I want to say that she's the type of fighter we should expect massive improvements from, because since she got started late in her MMA career, technically, yes, we should expect to see massive improvements from her, but she's 32 years old, so we don't know how hard she's going at her MMA career, how serious she's taking it at this stage. Is she really looking to be world champion? Is she grinding every single day? I'm not entirely certain if that's what she's doing or not. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see. It does look like, based on her Instagram, that she's working on her hands, which that's something good, but you don't want to see her testing that out against a striker the caliber of Marina Rodriguez. This is another fight where the line really bothers me. I mean, this is a striker versus grappler contest. You know, to the ends of the earth, that's exactly what this is. If Cynthia Calvillo is the one who imposes her will, she wins this fight. If she gets the takedowns that she wants to get, that she can get, she runs away with this thing. However, if Marina Rodriguez is able to use her footwork and defend the takedown, Cynthia Calvillo is going to be a fish out of water on the feet, and Rodriguez will use her ranginess to just pick her apart. She's going to have a massive height and reach advantage. However, that opens her legs up to the takedown of Cynthia Calvillo. I've always talked about that the shorter, stockier fighter, you've got an easier time getting in on those long legs if the taller fighter doesn't know how to use it. I'm steering way clear of this fight. I think it's going to be a fun matchup, and I'm very interested to see how this thing goes. Both of these women are really, really something else. I mean, 8-1 versus 12-0. This is a solid fight here in the division. I've got a slight lean to Marina Rodriguez. I think she'll be able to defend the takedown. I think she's strong and athletic enough to keep this thing standing and then just kind of pick Calvillo apart for 15 minutes. But, I mean, I wouldn't stand on a hill with that one. If you like Cynthia Calvillo and you think she'll get the takedowns here, she's damn good, man, and she trains out with Team Alpha Male. Chick's got it going on, so I wouldn't blame you one bit for taking a slight underdog shot with Cynthia Calvillo either. Full stay away from me. Full pass. Hard pass. Now we come to the main event, the pièce de résistance, the crème de la crème. Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Alistair Overeem. What a fight. This is a good one. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is stepping in on short notice and giving us an absolute banger of a main event. This is better than the original fight. So Alistair Overeem is an absolute legend. The man is turning 40 at his next birthday. He's 39 years old, and he's still just making shit happen. He's a complete brick shit house. 45 wins, 23 KOs, 17 submissions. He has got an 89% finish rate. Damn. And he's 2-2 in his last 4, but he fought freaking Curtis Blades and Francis Ngannou. If you take those two freaks out of it, he KO'd Mark Hunt and won for a decision over Fabricio Verdum before that. I mean, he's got a hell of a record on him, and he's still fighting the top competition and realistically not doing half bad. I mean, the young monsters of the division are getting him, and then current champion Stipe Miocic got him back in 2016. But I mean, that's it. Everybody else he's crushing everybody else. Jairzinho is the new kid on the block. He's 9-0. He's the inheritor of the death touch. He joins Francis Ngannou in the ranks of the scariest men in the UFC's heavyweight division. He's a phenomenal, absolutely insanely decorated kickboxer prior to getting into MMA. He's 8-1 on his fights. He's got 8 KO TKOs, and only one time has he gone to decision. And we saw his power on full display in his first 3 UFC fights. He fought Junior Albini, and in the second round decided he had had enough and put the kid down. He put Alan Crowder down in 9 seconds, setting a UFC record. I'm sorry, not a UFC record because of Street Jesus, but he KO'd Alan Crowder with a freaking jab in 9 seconds. We know Alan Crowder's a bum, but still. Then he KOs Andrei Arlovski in 29 seconds. He has just barely 1 minute and 30 seconds of UFC fight time and 3 UFC wins. Damn. I mean, he's knocking on the door of freaking Francis Ngannou. I mean, that's the kind of power we're talking about with this guy. I know he hasn't fought anybody big, but seriously, he's crushed these cans who are in the UFC. I am so excited for this fight. I seriously can't explain how excited for this fight that I am. Alistair Overeem is older. He's got chin issues after getting KO'd 13 times in his MMA career. But he's smart. He's very intelligent. And that's the thing that we're going to rely on here in this fight. This is the fight that I tweeted out way early. 2 weeks ago before we went on the break, I tweeted out Alistair Overeem. I got him at -115 because I wanted to lock that line in. I am surprised that it hasn't moved more. He's sitting at about -120 right now. So apparently people are still edging on that power of Jairzinho Rozenstruik. You can get him at -120. He's -125 in a couple spots, and 52% of the money has come in on Alistair. Now, it's not usually smart to take the older fighter in these types of situations, and especially with the chin issues that Overeem has. That's one of the rules of the Die Hard MMA podcast. We don't bet on chinny fighters. All you're going, Clint, what the hell? What are you doing? Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing. Jairzinho has only fought 3 UFC fighters, none of which, except for Andrei Arlovski, are UFC caliber. Albini's gone. Crowder's gone. They were both cans that didn't belong in the first place. And Arlovski is old and withered. So we have to put that little asterisk next to his wins. Junior Albini took Jairzinho down at will in their fight in the first round. And he even had a submission locked up, and I thought he was going to tap out Rozenstruik. However, Rozenstruik managed to wiggle out of it, and also Junior Albini was bad, allowing Jairzinho to get back to his feet. And then at the start of the second round, he put him down. If you go to the mat and you get into a submission lock with Alistair Overeem, you're not getting back up. This man knows the weakness that he has. He has adjusted his game plan and his style in the latter part of his career. He has a grappling heavy style these days because he tries to protect his chin. And I think this is going to be a range game. Alistair Overeem is going to stay on the outside at the very end of his range where he will have a height and reach advantage, and Jairzinho will not be able to close the distance and hit him. Then he will close the distance entirely and fight briefly in the clinch or get a takedown and get this thing to the mat. Once it gets to the mat, I don't expect Jairzinho to be able to get back up. He's either going to get grounded, pounded, TKO'd, or choked out by Alistair Overeem. Alistair Overeem knows better than to stand and trade with a guy that's got that kind of power. He learned that lesson against Francis Ngannou back in 2017. However, Jairzinho is not the physical beast that Ngannou is, where Alistair Overeem would struggle to get that kind of a takedown on a man like that. Jairzinho is too new, too fresh, too green in MMA. He doesn't have the grappling game to compete. It's a massive glaring hole. And I think this is where he eats that first loss. I do expect big things from Biggie Boy. I think Jairzinho is going to go far, and I think he's going to outlast Alistair Overeem. He's only 31 years old. He's got a long way to go, and he's going to be a fun fighter for us to keep an eye on. But we're getting a buy low price on a absolute veteran like Alistair Overeem. And Jairzinho is taking a real quick turnaround after facing Arlovski in November. He doesn't have any time to game plan for Alistair Overeem. He's simply coming in with the stand and bang mentality that he had in his last fight. I don't know that he is going to have any time to improve on that takedown defense. All three of his fights have been in this year. You're telling me that he's going to go from being able to get taken down essentially at will by Junior Albini back in February to now he can out-grapple a veteran like Alistair Overeem, who's got years and years and years of wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience in his mixed martial arts career. I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I think we've got to take this opportunity. Don't get me wrong. It's entirely possible that Alistair tries to close the distance and Jairzinho gets him with a real short punch. We saw the way he handled Arlovski, that real quick hook, super fast, super short distance. I mean, he could absolutely get Alistair with a hook or an uppercut while he's closing the distance, but I think I've got to take this shot. I've got to roll with Alistair Overeem one more time here. We've got him at minus 115. You can still get him at minus 120 or minus 125. Obviously, if money keeps on coming in on him, then you'll probably want to avoid this one. And I'm also tempted to take the under. The problem is the under is massively juiced. It's minus 140 for the under 1.5. And honestly, yeah, I'm taking it. I'm going to go under 1.5 at minus 140 because I actually think that that is kind of an insurance bet. I think that Alistair Overeem wins this thing via takedown and ground and pound in the first round. If he doesn't, Jairzinho will crush his face. Jairzinho has only been out of the first round twice, and one of those two times he finished it in the first minute of the second round that would still hit that under. Knowing the chin issues that Alistair Overeem has, if Jairzinho lands on him, it will be a knockout. So I'm doubling up here. We're going to take Alistair Overeem at minus 115 and the under 1.5 at minus 140. Let's freaking go. I've got to correct myself real quick. I know I said that Biggie Boy's got less than a minute and a half of fight time, and someone is going to be chirping at me in the YouTube comment section or on Twitter. He went to the second round, and I apologize. I did my math wrong. I know he's got that full 5 minutes in the bank there, but still, he's got less than 2 rounds of UFC experience and 3 wins, so shut up. Math is hard. Let's recap those picks. We are kicking our night off with Muradov versus Smith, going under 2.5 rounds at a juicy plus 120. We're going to roll with Alves versus Means over 2.5 at minus 140. We're going to hit our chick Aspen Lad at minus 155 on the bounce back. We're going to bet Alistair Overeem to derail the hype train at minus 115 and get one last crack at that heavyweight belt. We will also take the Alistair Overeem versus Rozenstruik under 1.5 as a little bit of insurance at minus 140. Alistair could cash that bad boy himself, and if he doesn't and he gets caught by Jairzinho, then we'll break even with a very slight loss on that one because you know that KO is coming quick if it happens. Thank you all for sticking with me. Welcome back. Hit the like button, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you know when I put out this content. Do me a favor if you're on Twitter, give me a retweet, spread the word. We are going to crush the end of 2019 just like we have the whole year. Let's roll! Sorry, I just get so excited.